It's okay. A very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. A very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much to all our viewers for joining us for today's national budget presentation. Look at the 2021 budget.
And to make provision to this. Three, subsection 1 of the Constitution is read with section 7.
Honorable Minister, you are not connected. Please, may you be connected.
Thank you. We'll try again. The technology is not performing. Yeah, it's okay. Can I be heard now? Yes, definitely.
You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that leave be granted to present a statement of the estimated revenues and expenditures of the Republic of Zimbabwe for the 2022 financial year and to make provisions for matters ancillary and incidental to this purpose. This is in compliance with section 103, subsection 1 of the Constitution, as read with section 2, subsection 2A of the Public Finance Management Act, General Regulations of 2019. As an introduction, Madam Speaker, ma'am, allow me to thank His Excellency, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, for his leadership and guidance in formulating this budget. Mr. President, sir. I also want to express my appreciation to the Honorable Vice President, Dr. CGDN Chiwenga, fellow cabinet ministers, line ministries, departments and agencies for their valuable input into this process. Special recognition goes to the Speaker, Honorable Speaker, for your leadership in steering the honorable members of this august House in undertaking nationwide consultation and clearly presenting the views of the people through various portfolio committees, in particular the Portfolio Committee on Budget, Finance, and Economic Development. Madam Speaker, ma'am, allow me to also extend my gratitude to the development partners, civil society, professionals, business organizations, and individuals whose input helped in shaping this budget. This budget is a people's budget, as it responds to the various issues raised by stakeholders through consultative processes. Key among the issues raised include the need to prioritize agriculture production, agriculture financing, infrastructure development, social services delivery, scaling up of social protection programs, including care for people living with disabilities, the need for predictability and consistency of fiscal and monetary policies. I've heeded the call by citizens and made provisions in this budget. Madam Speaker, ma'am, allow me now to turn to the 2022 budget itself, which is presented under the theme, Reinforcing Sustainable Economic Recovery and Resilience. Borrowing from the philosopher Alain de Botton, he said, a good half of the art of living is resilience. Therefore, the 2022 national budget will seek to attain the following: strengthen macro-fiscal stability, consolidating the agricultural food systems transformation strategy that seeks to guarantee food security, advancing the policy on value chains and value addition for purposes of job creation and growth, enhancing public service delivery, including social protection and infrastructure development, strengthening governance to continue the re-engagement process and support that, and finally, focusing on climate change mitigation and energy security. Before turning to the above issues, a review of global and domestic economic developments during 2021 and beyond will assist in contextualizing the 2022 budget. On the screen, Madam Speaker, ma'am, Your Excellency, the President, you will see some charts begin to flow in that screen as I speak to highlight and buttress certain aspects of the presentation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the global economy is projected to grow at 5.9% in 2021 and 4.9% in 2022, slightly lower, and is expected to average 3.3% over the medium term beyond 2022. This growth is dominated by advanced economies, which are expected to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic situation due to policy support interventions and the opening up of global supply chains. On the screen, maybe it's too small, but you see some figures showing the global economic growth projections, as well as positioning Zimbabwe in that context. The Sub-Saharan Africa region is expected to grow by an average of 3.7% in 2021, which is lower than the global rate of 5.9%, amid COVID-19 restrictive measures, slow vaccination programs, limited fiscal space, and growing debt burden. And that is shown on slide 3. Let me now turn back to the domestic economy, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Madam Speaker, ma'am, domestic GDP growth for 2021 is estimated to remain strong at 7.8% growth, mainly on account of a good 2020-2021 agricultural season, higher international mineral commodity prices, the stabilizing macroeconomic environment, and better management of the COVID-19 pandemic situation. In 2022, the economy is projected to grow at 5.5%, underpinned by higher output in mining, in manufacturing, in agriculture, construction, as well as accommodation and food services. This speaks to the tourism sector as well. We expect some modest recovery in that sector. The 2022 growth projection is, however, subject to risks emanating from the future path of the pandemic and its impact on key sectors of the economy. I now turn to a critical aspect of the macroeconomy, which is inflation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, annual inflation was on a downward path during a greater part of the year to 54.5% as of October 2021, compared to 471.3% recorded during the same period last year, underpinned by a tight fiscal and monetary policy stance. In slide 5, if they're still moving the slides forward, you see the charts showing that downward movement in inflation. But we've noticed that of late, inflation is ticking up, mainly due to parallel market activities and also marketing discipline. However, the power market premiums and marketing discipline always presents challenges on efforts of containing inflation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, let me quote from Henry Hazlitt, a journalist who writes quite a bit for the Wall Street Journal. He wrote that inflation is not only unnecessary for growth. As long as it exists, it is an enemy of economic growth. Therefore, government is rigorously implementing necessary interventions, such as the review of the current foreign exchange auction system, tightening it and fine-tuning it, further tightening of monetary policy, and curbing malpractices in the financial sector to ensure that inflation is back on the desired downward path. Let me say a few words about the financial sector and monetary policy further. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the central bank is implementing a three-pronged policy approach to conservative monetary targeting framework, supported by prudent management of the exchange rate through the auction system, as well as measures to maintain and sustain the current financial sector stability. In short, Madam Speaker, ma'am, the financial sector is stable and it is sound right across the banking sector and the capital market sectors and insurance, pension fund sector as well. Going forward, the conservative monetary targeting framework will be strengthened to ensure that money supply in the economy is maintained at levels consistent with economic growth and inflation targets and in line with the national budget assumptions and the 2022 macroeconomic projections. To be precise, the target for reserve money growth M0 is currently a 10% growth rate per quarter, which is a sharp drop from where we were over 25% over a year ago. Tight monetary policy indeed is the order of the day. I now turn to the issue of balance of payments, our external sector. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the country's external sector position remains strong, with the current account continuing to be in surplus. Preliminary estimates show that the current account balance slightly narrowed from a surplus of $688.2 million in the first 9 months of 2021 to a surplus of $684.4 million for the same period in 2021. Sorry, first figure is 2020, second figure is 2021. Same period in terms of 9 months from January to September of 2020, January to September 2021. So slight narrowing, but positive nonetheless. Merchandise exports increased by 19.2% to $4.1 billion in the first 9 months of 2021 from a $3.4 billion level in 2020, spurred by increases in agriculture and mineral exports, while manufactured exports remained flat. And again, you see charts that on the screen that pertain to these facts. Merchandise imports increased to $4.2 billion in the first 9 months of 2021, representing a 27.3% increase from the $3.3 billion figure for the comparable period in 2020, driven by increases in fuel, machinery, and raw material imports. The increase in imports was reflective of the growing economy and foreign currency availability on the auction system. I must here say we're always grateful to our diaspora. In terms of remittances, those remain strong. By year end, we should be close to $1.5 billion in diaspora remittances. And in 2022, we expect a similar figure. And that's what also makes sure that the current account is always in positive territory in surplus. Let me now turn to the budget performance and the outlook. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the state of our public finances is sound and consistent with the 2021 budget objectives and targets. Revenue collections during the first 9 months to September 2021 amounted to 317.4 billion Zimbabwe dollars against a projection of 291.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars, resulting in a positive variance of 25.8 billion Zimbabwe dollars, about 8.9%. But by year end, this is just to September, by year end, we're now expected to reach 495.01 billion, which is about 16.6% of GDP. And there's a slide that shows this. Madam Speaker, ma'am, total expenditures for the same period amounted to 351.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars against a target of 305.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars, resulting in an expenditure overrun of 46.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars, which is about 15.2%. Projected expenditure to the year end amounts to 509 billion Zimbabwe dollars, mainly on account of COVID-19 related expenditures, increased outlays on grain procurement, as well as other development expenditures, especially on infrastructure projects, roads, dams, and other infrastructure projects. As a result, the budget deficit for the first 9 months stood at 32.8 billion Zimbabwe dollars and is now expected to end the year at 14 billion Zimbabwe dollars, but this is not a cause for concern. It is only 0.5% of GDP, well within our targets and also well within the SADC target of 3% of GDP. And I will turn to public debt. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the total public debt as of the end of September 2021 amounted to 13.7 billion US dollars, comprising of public external debt of 13.2 billion, which now includes blocked funds from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, and domestic debt, which is about 532 million US dollars equivalent. Just one sentence on the blocked funds. I will be bringing a bill before this House for the debt assumption of the $3 billion that we have assumed as central government from the central bank in the form of blocked funds. And I want to say a few words about the development partner support, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Development partners continue to play a pivotal role in supporting government's efforts towards the implementation of NDS-1 programs and projects. During the period January to September 2021, the country received development assistance amounting to 647.6 million US dollars, of which 401.7 million was from bilateral partners and 245.9 million was from multilateral partners. A further 202.4 million in development assistance is projected during the fourth quarter of 2021. That should be in slide 15 if we're counting. In 2022, support from the development partners is projected at 764.7 million US dollars, mainly towards health, agriculture, social protection, and governance programs. Madam Speaker, ma'am, let me now turn to the 2022 macro budget framework, which is the core of all our budget estimates. Madam Speaker, ma'am, consistent with a growth projection of 5.5% in 2022, total revenue collections are projected at 850.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars for 2022. This is 16.8% of GDP. On the other hand, expenditures in 2022 are projected at 927.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars, which is about 18.3% of GDP. The total recurrent spending will constitute 13.4% of GDP, while capital programs will take up 5% of GDP. Employment costs will be contained at about 6.7% of GDP or 36.7% of revenues. Should be a slide for that to amplify those points. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the 2022 budget financing requirement or the deficit is projected to be at 76.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars, which will be financed through issuance of government securities, utilization of the country's SDR allocation, and external loan disbursements. This deficit of 76.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars amounts to 1.5% of GDP. This again is in line with our NDS projections, NDS-1 projections, and is within the SADC target of 3% and below. Madam Speaker, ma'am, you may recall that under the general allocation of SDRs of 456 billion, which is equivalent to 650 billion US dollars, the government of Zimbabwe in August 2021 was allocated 677.4 million SDRs, which translates to 958 million US dollars equivalent. This is from the International Monetary Fund. Part of this SDR allocation will be used to finance the budget exclusively for social sectors, namely health, education, and productive sectors, particularly around supporting value chains and the construction of infrastructure, as well as boosting our reserves to support macroeconomic stability. Let me turn to the fiscal policy thrust. In consolidation of macroeconomic stability, a prudent fiscal policy complemented by tight monetary policy is being pursued under the 2022 budget. This entails containing expenditures within the budget, non-recourse to central bank financing, continuation of monetary targeting, and improving the foreign currency auction system. Let me now turn to 2022 vote appropriations and say more about specific sectors of intervention through this budget. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the proposed estimates for 2022, including constitutional and statutory appropriations, is 927.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars, or 18.3% of GDP. The amount, however, falls far short of requests submitted by line ministries, departments, agencies, the NDAs, and presented during the 2022 budget hearings, which were in excess of 2.7 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. The proposed vote appropriations prioritize projects and programs drawn from NDS 1 and are supportive of infrastructure investment and public service delivery. Let me turn to the area of agriculture, water, climate, and rural development. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the thrust under agriculture generically is to surpass the 2021 production levels through the implementation of the key tenets of the agriculture recovery plan. Based on the current agriculture financing model, government will finance the productive social protection scheme, or Fumvuza in Kwasa. Notice we are using the phrase productive social protection scheme because that's what it is in economic terms. This is for both crop and livestock support for vulnerable households. While banks will fund the private sector component, which is the National Enhanced Agriculture Productivity Scheme, with government providing guarantees within the partnership where necessary. Consequently, an allocation of 124 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Water, Climate, and Rural Development is provided under the budget, targeted towards the following key interventions: grain production and grain purchases, horticulture, business advisory and extension services, agriculture research and colleges, animal disease prevention and control, agriculture engineering and mechanization, water and sanitation. This includes dams, bore drilling, and then irrigation development, which is very important for evacuating water from our dams, and finally, rural development. I now turn to the mining area. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the country will continue to leverage on its mineral resources in order to achieve the desired $12 billion mining industry by year 2023. In support of this, the budget has a provision of 3 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development for implementation of the following programs and activities, among others, of course: the amendment of the Mines and Minerals Act, the operationalization of the cadastral system, which is under trial, the mining exploration, we invest in mining exploration, decentralization of operations, opening up of closed mines, hiring and capacitating mining extension officers, which are similar to the agri-techs extension officers, but this time for mining, so that we have foot soldiers on the ground to monitor what's going on the ground and support miners as they go about their business. The establishment of gold service centers and mineral value addition and beneficiation. We now turn to a key sector, which is industry, and there are a few words here. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the 2022 budget seeks to facilitate a shift towards production of high value and manufactured products, which contribute more to output, export earnings, and create decent jobs. Additionally, the thrust is on enhancing local production and productivity through domestication of value chains, including domestic raw materials. I therefore propose to allocate 3.9 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce towards the following programs and projects, among others: the capacitation of the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, industrial upgrading, Zisco steel revival, and value chain development. Let me now turn to the tourism and environment and climate sectors. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the tourism sector was most affected under the COVID-19 conditions and will require more support for its recovery. Hence, implementation of the National Tourism Recovery and Growth Strategy is receiving higher priority under the 2022 budget. Therefore, an allocation of 3.7 billion to the Ministry of Environment, Climate, Tourism, and Hospitality Industry, which should also cater for the implementation of climate change and mitigation measures. I now turn to the issue of youth, sports, arts, and recreation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the 2022 budget seeks to leverage on the youth demographic dividend for high economic growth by providing an enabling environment through establishment of innovation incubators and hubs, training, and interactive centers. The 2022 budget allocation to the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Arts, and Recreation is set at 7.8 billion Zimbabwe dollars, which targets rehabilitation and upgrading of sporting facilities, as well as youth entrepreneurship initiatives, such as youth in mining programs and youth in agriculture programs. This also includes extending the youth employment tax exemption initiative, which we started 2 years ago, and capitalization of Empower Bank, which should create opportunities for productive activities for our youths, and hence reduce idleness and incidents of drug abuse. There's also a budget allocation within this overall budget for the ministry, Madam Speaker, ma'am, that has been set aside to cover and tackle the issue of drug abuse directly, so especially among our youth. We will also recapacitate the arts, the fund for artists, to support our artists, young artists. I now turn to the issue of women in SME development. Madam Speaker, ma'am, capitalization of empowerment institutions such as Women Development Fund, Community Development Fund, Zimbabwe Women's Microfinance Bank, and Small to Medium Scale Enterprise Development Corporation, SMEDCO, are critical in achieving gender inclusivity. In addition, the free sanitary ware program will be expanded and supported through this budget. We will capacitate the Women's Bank, recapitalize it, but also include a guarantee element, especially for those female entrepreneurs who cannot afford to post adequate and standard security for their loans. This will ensure better access to loans from this very important bank. In furthering the empowerment drive and inclusive society, the budget has provision of 4.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Women's Affairs, Community, Small and Medium Enterprises Development for interventions tailor-made to meet the needs of women and SMEs. This also includes developing infrastructure for SMEs to operate from. I now turn to the broader area of infrastructure. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the country's aggressive drive and commitment towards infrastructure development has resulted in completion of several projects in almost all sectors, largely utilizing our own domestic resources, and notwithstanding the current challenges emanating from the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2022 budget provides for an overall infrastructure spending plan of 156.4 billion Zimbabwe dollars to support mainly ongoing projects. An amount of 10.9 billion has been set aside for the capitalization of state-owned enterprises, whilst 23.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars is earmarked for capacitation of the line ministries in order to enhance public service delivery. Let me turn specifically to transportation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the thrust of in 2022 is to continue to modernize the transport network with particular focus on completion of ongoing projects. Therefore, the budget allocates 60.8 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure Development for the following key programs: road rehabilitation and development, modernizing technology on toll gates, upgrading of railway infrastructure, a capitalization or recapitalization of Air Zimbabwe, upgrading and rehabilitation of our airports, and upgrading of border posts. Let me say a few words about the energy sector. Madam Speaker, ma'am, unreliable and inconsistent power supply continues to undermine economic growth and recovery. Key priority areas during 2022 therefore include completion of Wanke 7 and 8 expansion. We also undertake rehabilitation and maintenance of the old thermal power stations, as well as crowding the private sector investment. These are the independent power producers. We're working on that. Also critical is rural electrification programs that seek to extend the grid to the underserved areas. Therefore, the 2022 budget allocates 3.9 billion to the Ministry of Energy and Power Development. This will be complemented by loan financing and ZESA's own resources. I now turn to the area of housing. Madam Speaker, ma'am, consistent with the NDS one strategic objective, aggressive housing delivery will rely on government cooperation with private players. Emphasis will be on applying new, modern, and cost-effective alternative building technologies and designs that are resilient to climate change and are affordable, which conforms to local planning standards and building codes, of course. The densification model will be employed, whilst the smart city concept already adopted will be cascaded to other critical areas. With regards to institutional housing focus, this will be continued. Adequate housing will be provided and conducive working space for public servants through rehabilitation and upgrading of existing facilities and construction of office buildings, as well as purchase of properties in critical cases. In this regard, a total of 29 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being allocated to the various institutional accommodation projects, and a further 500 million Zimbabwe dollars for recapitalization of the National Housing Fund. But I must hasten to say that the Minister of National Housing and Social Welfare is being allocated a budget of 10.1 billion Zimbabwe dollars, which is included within the overall 29 billion Zimbabwe dollars targeting the housing sector. I now turn to the local government issues. Madam Speaker, ma'am, aging infrastructure coupled with increasing population makes it imperative that we invest in new water supply sources and sewer infrastructure for our urban areas. To this end, through conditional grants, a total of 2.1 billion will be availed to urban and rural local authorities. Therefore, through the intergovernmental fiscal program, or rather intergovernmental fiscal allocation, which is the devolution resource allocation, an amount of 42.5 billion, being 5% of the total revenues, will be disbursed to all local authorities for implementation of impactful community infrastructure projects. The Minister of Local Government itself will receive directly, Minister of Local Government Public Works, just to say it in a complete way, will receive 24 3.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars in terms of budget allocation. I now turn to information, communication, and technology. Madam Speaker, ma'am, investing in ICT has become critical given the huge demand and use of ICT in the digital world and the COVID-19 era. Therefore, the 2022 national budget is allocating 3.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Information, Communication, and Technology to implement various projects, which include improving coverage and access to broadband infrastructure, deployment and installation of smart e-government systems, as well as expansion of network to marginalized communities. Let me turn to human capital development at the education sector, Madam Speaker, ma'am. The demand for education services covering primary, secondary, higher and tertiary levels have been growing over the years. However, this has not been matched with infrastructure development and the necessary human capital investment. Turning to primary and secondary education, to implement the ministry priority projects, an amount of 124 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being allocated to the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education under the 2022 national budget. Turning to higher and tertiary education, to support interventions under institutions of higher learning, an amount of 35.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being allocated to the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science, and Technology Development. I now turn to the area of health and well-being. Madam Speaker, ma'am, despite the current efforts towards a revitalization of our health sector and successful rollout of the COVID-19 pandemic response programs, it is apparent that gaps still exist, they still remain in the health delivery system, attributed to shortages of medicines, critical infrastructure, and equipment. Therefore, priority in the 2022 budget will be on rehabilitation, upgrading, and construction of healthcare infrastructure, including provision of medical equipment, ambulances, operational vehicles, among other things. Further, the government will increase funding for medical consumables, hiring of additional medical personnel, and reviewing salaries and wages for the sector. Consequently, the 2022 national budget has allocated 117.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Health and Child Care, which represents 14.9% of the budget. That's an Abuja target right there. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me turn to the area of social protection. Here I'll begin, Madam Speaker, with a quote from the Nobel laureate in economics, Professor Joseph Stiglitz. He says that development is about transforming the lives of people and not just transforming economies. So social protection, social welfare is critical. Hence, government will continue to prioritize support towards social protection programs, such as the Productive Social Protection Scheme, which is from Vudza Intwasa, the Basic Education Assistant module, BEAM, support to the elderly, those living with disabilities, and children in difficult circumstances, and foster homes, among other areas. Therefore, the 2022 national budget allocates 19.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare towards upscaling social protection programs. I now turn to the area of information, publicity, and broadcasting services. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the media is at the center of citizen and state interaction. Therefore, an allocation of 2.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside for the Ministry of Information, Publicity, Broadcasting Services towards image building, international engagement and re-engagement programs, as well as upgrading of transmission infrastructure and digital migration project. This also includes the financial support, a budget allocation for ZBC. I now turn to the area of foreign affairs and international trade. Madam Speaker, ma'am, our foreign missions play a critical role in portraying the country's image and a gateway for international relations. The welfare and staff of our missions has largely been addressed, save for accommodation and tools of trade. However, the current state of facilities at some of our missions, as well as the welfare of the embassy staff, needs to be improved. The 2022 national budget therefore allocates 14.9 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade for operations, procurement of tools of trade, including vehicles, and to address critical infrastructure requirements at our embassies and chancelleries. I now turn to the area of peace and security. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the prevailing peace and security is important for sustainable economic development and must be preserved at all costs. Government will continue to capacitate the security organs of the state to ensure that our security services are fully funded to enable them to effectively execute their mandate of reducing crime in order to create a conducive environment for development. So an amount of 49.4 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being proposed as an allocation to the Ministry of Home Affairs and Cultural Heritage. And an amount of 61.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being proposed as budget allocation to the Ministry of Defense and War Veterans Affairs. I now turn to the area of justice delivery. Madam Speaker, ma'am, government is committed to effective and efficient delivery of justice. Hence, an allocation has been made for construction and upgrading and rehabilitation of facilities, of court facilities, as part of the decentralization program of justice delivery. This also includes institutional housing for prison staff and prison facilities. An amount of 22.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside for the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. I now turn to the area of governance. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the overarching objective on governance is to improve public and justice service delivery, rule of law, and uphold national unity, peace, and reconciliation as building blocks for achieving equitable and sustainable national harmony and development. Therefore, the 2022 budget has set aside resources to capacitate independent commissions to enable them to undertake their constitutional mandates, and this as follows in terms of allocation. Zimbabwe Media Commission, 510 million Zimbabwe dollars. Zimbabwe Gender Commission, 497.6 million Zimbabwe dollars. Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, 403.9 million Zimbabwe dollars. The National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, 441.3 million Zimbabwe dollars. Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, 931.7 million Zimbabwe dollars. Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, 11.6 billion Zimbabwe dollars, large figure because of the upcoming elections. And a Land Commission at 1.8 billion Zimbabwe dollars, and the National Prosecuting Authority at 1.6 billion Zimbabwe dollars. I now turn to the support to Parliament. Madam Speaker, ma'am, government recognizes the critical role of Parliament as the absolute legislative authority and its oversight role on government activities. In this regard, 14.6 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated for Parliament to enable the House to conduct its business in an effective and efficient manner, covering the following areas: capacitation of the Constituency Development Fund, construction of constituency information centers, sessional expenses, and constituency visits support. The allocation also caters for the welfare of members of Parliament. That includes salaries, pensions, medical expenses, transport services, and research. Let me turn to the area of enhancing efficiencies in the public service. This is compensation of employees, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the government recognizes the role of human capital in the provision of public services. However, recent inflation developments have eroded disposable incomes of employees. In response, government is making efforts to restore the value of salaries for public servants, beginning with the 2021 bonus payment in hard currency in US dollars. In 2022, an amount of 340 billion Zimbabwe dollars, or 41% of revenues, or 7.1% of GDP, has been set aside for wages and salaries for public servants and pensions. The resources have also been set aside to support the following: the harmonization of conditions of service, social security, public service pension fund scheme, the personal issue vehicles benefit, civil service housing fund, public service training centers, and the 2022 population and housing census. I now turn to the area of tax policy and administration measures. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I'm proposing revenue measures that seek to maintain fiscal stability through stimulating growth of productive sectors, enhancing revenue collection, providing relief and simplifying tax administration in order to improve the doing business environment. Let me start with support to industry and delve into the rebate of duty facilities, particularly the area of transparency and accountability on the utilization of rebate facilities. Madam Speaker, ma'am, government is over the period 2009 to date availed tax rebates and VAT deferment to manufacturing, mining, tourism, agriculture, transport, energy, and health sectors. Whereas the primary function of tax laws is to mobilize resources, government spending has, however, also been executed through tax preferences targeted at lowering production costs. Provision of such concessions reduces the amount of tax revenue that would otherwise have been collected. Unlike other spending programs, tax revenue foregone through concessions is not subject to appropriation. For purposes of enhancing transparency and accountability of the budget, an annex outlining the value of goods and revenue foregone during the period 2016 to August 2021 from granting the various tax concessions to productive sectors has been provided. Some observations, Madam Speaker, ma'am, on the operations of corporates that have been granted various rebates, which I need to share with this august House. Whereas availing of tax rebates and VAT deferment has gone a long way to enhance productivity, issues of concern observed during beneficiary company tours include the following, among others: false declaration of minerals produced, export of unpolished granite, non-submission of monthly returns to the ministry responsible for mines and mining development, environmental degradation, lack of corporate social responsibility, such as community schools, hospitals, water, and housing suitable for human habitation, especially in the mining sector. The non-provision of safety wear for employees, false declaration of physical addresses, and transfer of capital equipment to a new site without ZIMRA's approval. Madam Speaker, ma'am, in order to enhance transparency and accountability in the administration of rebate facilities and address the deficiencies that have been identified, I propose to include the following provisions in the transparency report that should be filed by applicants. And it says as follows: ZIMRA certified tax payment for the period prior to the application. For exporting companies, CD1 form discharged for the period prior to the application. Corporate social responsibility executed, activities to protect the environment against degradation, and in the case of mining, submission of monthly returns to the ministry responsible for mines and mining development, monthly returns. Let me turn to the issue of rebate of duty on capital equipment imported for use in specified industries. Madam Speaker, ma'am, in order to assist the retooling of companies, government in 2016 introduced a rebate of duty on capital equipment imported for use in specified industries, which include mining, manufacturing, agriculture, and energy sectors. Cognizant of the wide usage of such capital equipment by productive sectors and the need to ease the cost of doing business, I propose to provide duty-free importation of the capital equipment through the tariff regime. Furthermore, I propose to strengthen the provisions of governing the facility in order to minimize loopholes in administration through the following measures. Companies applying for the rebate of duty facility should be incorporated. Some have not been incorporated in the past. No third-party companies should be granted rebate of duty. These include tribute agreements and hired suppliers or contractors. A minimum threshold of $10,000 or of the value of the equipment or its equivalent in local currency is required for processing of a rebate. Let me turn to the dairy industry, Madam Speaker, ma'am, on the issue of suspension of duty of milk powder. Government support to the dairy sector over the years has triggered a positive response towards development of the dairy industry. Since the beginning of the year, investment across the value chain amounted to $20 million. In order to augment the supply of raw milk, mindful of the need to revitalize the dairy industry, I propose to extend duty suspension on minimum quantities of milk powder for the year 2022. As a quid pro quo, dairy processors are expected to increase support to outgrower schemes with a view to build the stock of the dairy herd in order to increase raw milk production. Let me delve deeper into dairy revitalization. In line with interventions proposed in NDS 1 to improve performance in the dairy value chain, I propose to introduce a levy of 5% on the value of imported dairy products. The funds will be ring-fenced for recapitalizing the Dairy Revitalization Fund, targeted at growth and development of the dairy sector by increasing the national dairy herd, enhancing competitiveness in the dairy sector, and supporting modernization and standardization of local milk production. Funds will be disbursed from the Consolidated Revenue Fund to smallholder farmers or at a concessionary interest rate in order to ensure sustainability of the fund as well as optimizing growth of the sector. Furthermore, in order to guarantee growth of the sector, a minimum of 80% of these funds should be used towards procurement of the dairy herd and not on administrative issues. I now attend to the tourism sector, Madam Speaker, ma'am, on the issue of suspension of duty on motor vehicles imported by safari and tour operators. I propose to extend suspension of duty on motor vehicles imported by the safari and tour operators for a further 2 years, beginning 1 January 2022. Let me turn to some revenue-enhancing measures, Madam Speaker, ma'am, starting with excise duty. In order to benchmark excise tax rates with the practice in the region, thereby curbing illicit flows and also mobilize additional revenue to the fiscus, I propose to increase excise duty on cigarettes from 20% plus $5 per 1,000 cigarettes to 25% plus $5 per 1,000 cigarettes. So that's the increase there. I further propose to introduce a flat rate of excise duty on energy drinks at a rate of 5 cents per liter or the local currency equivalent. how will this extra excise duty be used? We're ring fencing it for a very specific type of, Madam Speaker, ma'am, which is for supporting those who are suffering from non-communicable diseases, NCDs. So let me say something about then the Non-Communicable Diseases Fund that we are proposing be established. Incidences of non-communicable diseases, in particular cancer, diabetes, and hypertension, are on the increase. Additional funds generated from the review of the excise duty on cigarettes and energy drinks will be ring-fenced and appropriated from the Consolidated Revenue Fund towards treatment and support of cancer, of diabetes, and hypertension patients through this Non-Communicable Diseases Fund. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I now turn to the issue of motor vehicle insurance pool. The motor insurance pool was established in terms of the Road Traffic Act to provide third-party temporary cover to motorists entering into Zimbabwe. The insurance policy thus applies in on foreign registered motor vehicles, excluding motor vehicles covered by the COMESA Yellow Car Insurance Scheme. Due to the low claims ratio on these pooled funds, surplus funds accumulated in the pool are, however, distributed to participating short-term insurance entities. Hence, I proposed to redirect 20% of the premium for this insurance to the Consolidated Revenue Fund for assistance to victims of accidents. The last issue on enhancing revenues is like this, Madam Speaker, ma'am. This is a levy on new cellular telephony handsets. Madam Speaker, ma'am, whereas imported cellular handsets attract modest customs duty of 25%, the funds realized, however, point to evasion of the customs duty due to the nature of the items, which can be easily be concealed and smuggled into your pocket. In order to curb evasion, I propose to introduce a levy of $50 equivalent, which will be collected prior to registration of new cellular handsets by mobile network providers. However, where duty would have been paid, the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority will provide a refund of the levy within 30 days of receipt of payment from mobile network operators. Let me turn to some tax relief measures, starting with the tax-free threshold on personal income. In order to provide relief to taxpayers, let me sip some. So turning to tax relief threshold on personal income. In order to provide relief to taxpayers and also boost aggregate demand for goods and services, I propose to adjust the tax-free threshold from the current 10,000 Zimbabwe dollars to 30,000 Zimbabwe dollars, and also adjust the tax bands to end at 500,000 Zimbabwe dollars, above which a marginal tax rate of 40% will apply. This is with effect from 1 January 2022. I further propose to review the tax-free threshold on income accruing in foreign currency from $7 to $100. This is again with effect from 1 January 2022. Other foreign currency tax bands remain unchanged. Let me turn to the bonus tax-free threshold. I also propose to review the local currency tax-free bonus threshold from 25,000 Zimbabwe dollars to 100,000 Zimbabwe dollars, and the foreign currency tax-free bonus threshold from $320 to $700. This is with effect from 1 November 2021. I now turn to the taxation of retrenchment retrenchment packages. The government recognizes that a number of employees have been retrenched as employees adopt cost rationalization strategies, or rather as employers adopt cost rationalization strategies in response to the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to preserve the value of retrenchment packages, I propose to review the non-taxable portion of the local currency tax-free threshold from the greater of either 50,000 Zimbabwe dollars or a third of the retrenchment package, whichever is higher, to a maximum of 240,000 Zimbabwe dollars and to the greater of 400,000 Zimbabwe dollars or a third of the retrenchment package, whichever is greater, of course, up to a maximum of 2 million Zimbabwe dollars. This is for income and in local currency. These measures take effect from 1 January 2021. Let me turn to tax credits for employing physically challenged persons. The NDS-1 thrust is to protect vulnerable groups through new interventions and enhancement of existing programs. Since people living with physical challenges face significant barriers to employment, I therefore propose to introduce a tax credit of $50 or a local currency equivalent per additional employee recruited per month for corporates that employ physically challenged persons. The credit will, however, be limited to a maximum of $2,250 or its equivalent in local currency per year of assessment. This measure takes effect from 1 January 2022. A few words about tax administration, specifically VAT fiscalization. The fiscalization program has gone through different stages, culminating in the current phase where taxpayers are expected to fiscalize and interface their devices to facilitate real-time transmission of data to ZIMRA for audit purposes. The current rate of compliance to fiscalization across all categories of registered taxpayers is low. The low level of compliance has exposed tax administration to fraudulent VAT claims that undermine revenue collections, among other misdemeanors. In order to mitigate the risk of understating revenue, as well as to enhance transparency, thereby safeguarding fiscal revenues, I propose that only fiscalized tax invoices will be used for input tax claims. Furthermore, no tax clearance certificate will be issued to registered operators whose devices are not interfaced to the ZIMRA server. These measures take effect from 1 January 2022. Let me turn to the payment of excise duty in foreign currency. Whereas excise duty in foreign currency is payable, I'll start afresh. Whereas duty in foreign currency is payable on alcoholic beverages, tobacco, cigarettes, and other excisable products that include telephone, airtime, data, pre-owned motor vehicles are liable to excise duty in local currency. In order to ensure fairness and equity in the tax treatment of excisable products, excise duty will be levied in the currency of trade. Let me turn to warehousing of pre-owned motor vehicles in bond. Current legislation provides for warehousing and securing of goods in appointed and licensed bonded warehouses facilities without payment of duty, subject to other prescribed conditions. Goods imported into bonded warehouse must be cleared within a maximum period of 2 years. Pre-owned vehicles imported into bond constitute idle capital, which can otherwise be be productively utilized. In other cases, funds for the purchase of such vehicles are obtained on the power market, thereby perpetuating speculative and arbitrage opportunities. I therefore propose to preclude importation of pre-owned motor vehicles from goods that can be imported into bond. I therefore propose that in the case of pre-owned vehicles that are already in bonded warehouses, such vehicles should be entered into consumption within 6 months beginning 1 December 2021, failure of which such vehicles shall be forfeited to the state. I now turn to some legislative amendments. VAT on accommodation and visitor services. In support of efforts to boost local tourism following the slowdown in international tourist arrivals due to the COVID-19 pandemic, government waived VAT payable by domestic tourists for accommodation and visitor services within the framework of the COVID-19 economic recovery and stimulus package for a period of 12 months. I propose to extend the VAT exemption on accommodation and visitor services consumed by domestic tourists by a further 12 months with effect from 1 August 2021. Let me turn to a small issue on tax exemption on councillors' allowances. Madam Speaker, ma'am, allowances paid to councillors appointed in terms of the Urban Councils Act are exempt from tax. However, allowances paid to councillors appointed in terms of the Rural District Act are liable to tax. In order to ensure equity and fairness in the taxation of similar allowances, I propose to extend the income tax exemption to allowances paid to councillors appointed in terms of the Rural District Councils Act. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, ma'am, in conclusion, this 2022 national budget seeks to buttress the growth trajectory established in 2021 and enable the economy to build resilience against shocks, including the COVID-19 pandemic. We endeavor to execute the budget without wastages, delays, and with timeliness. The budget implements the NDS-1 objectives, which are being carefully monitored and evaluated through the implementation of the and evaluation framework. And with a unity of purpose and productive cooperation, Vision 2030 is attainable. Maybe at this juncture, let me share with you a quote from Proverbs 21, verse 5, which says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance. Amen. But everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." Madam Speaker, ma'am, I finally commend the 2022 national budget to this august House in compliance with the law and in compliance, and it is accompanied by the following documents. So the 2022 national budget statement, the NDS-1 programs and projects investment plan. All the projects from 2021 to 2025 have been itemized, and a budget provision or projection has been spelled out. The 2022 infrastructure investment plan specifically, the 2022 citizens budget, which is a summarized version of the budget, which is easy for ordinary citizens to follow. The estimate of expenditure, or so-called blue book, a draft finance bill, draft appropriation bill, and a statement on public debt. I thank you.
Tuli ya Zimbabwe tuli kulanga ikuti vamaniska kapi basulutko